Sitting in prison gives you a lot of time to think about your own stupidity. However, I thought of nothing but hatred. I reflected on hating my boss, my soon-to-be ex-wife Carol, and hating myself for being so damn stupid. My name is Michael Arnold, and when I say that, I was stupid. I mean stupidity. I was stupid. Like that ignorant husband who didn't know his wife was cheating on him. And she cheated on him with the person I hated most in my life, my boss Jacob Sanders. I was also stupid because I didn't know that this traitor was pregnant with his child. Foolishly, I thought the child was mine. I think my wife's pregnancy is what sparked the conversation. Honey, we need to talk. I guess I should back up a bit and explain everything. Oddly enough, my current problems began in first grade. I first came to know and ultimately hate Jacob Sanders when we were in first grade together. We've been enemies ever since he made fun of my freckles. This was the first of many fights. It ended in a draw when the teacher separated us. I had a bloody nose and he had a black eye. For the first 8 years of school, Jacob and I fought on average about 3 times a year, with third grade being the worst. We had 7 fights. However, in 8th grade, we only had 1 fight, for a good reason. I wanted nothing to do with Jacob and tried to stay away from him, but he wouldn't leave me alone. For some reason, he was jealous of me and constantly tried to outdo me. He tried to get better grades than me in each of our classes. He was better in science and literature. I was better in math and history. In other subjects, we were approximately the same. In sports, Jacob was a good athlete, but I was a little better. However, if I played a sport, Jacob would play the same and try to beat me. The fighting stopped, as I said, after 8th grade, when Jacob realized he couldn't beat me. Then he started trying to embarrass me or get me into trouble. Because of him, I was almost expelled and arrested while we were in school. It was during my sophomore year that someone broke into the school and painted the hallways. The authorities found my student ID next to an empty can in a trash container. The only thing that saved me was that the day before, I noticed my ticket was missing from my wallet and reported it. I knew it had to be Jacob because one day I was getting out of the shower and saw him walking away from my locker after practice. I decided that he was up to something and checked everything in the locker. When I got to my wallet, I checked the cash first and then looked at everything else. And then I noticed that my ticket was missing. I immediately went to the office and reported this. Somehow, Jacob ended up with a fart horn. He placed the device on the desk I was sitting at and turned it on. The sound of a fart echoed through the classroom, and then Jacob began to hold his nose and wave his hand. "Mike, what did you have for lunch?" He chuckled. The class laughed, but I used the good old trick. Whoever confessed is the one who shit himself. The class erupted in more laughter, prompting Miss Wormwood to warn us that if Jacob and I continued to disrupt the classroom, we would end up in detention. The fact that the teacher laughed at Use and then scolded Use made Jacob furious. He blushed but didn't say anything. Besides the fact that Jacob was trying to get me expelled and possibly even arrested, his attempts were more annoying than anything else. By and large, I didn't care that he was better than me. Other than the usual teenage insecurities, I was quite comfortable with who I was. However, there was one area that concerned me, and that was the girls. We were both pretty cute. However, Jacob's family was wealthy, which gave him an advantage over the girls at school. In the 11th grade, he got his own car, and it was not an old jalopy. His parents bought him a BMW Z4. The car cost $50,000. How could I compete with her? As it turns out, I was attractive enough to get my share of dates. On the other hand, Jacob dated cheerleaders and crowd girls. I reasoned that they were out of my league anyway, so I didn't care. However, he was not satisfied with his brilliant success with the girls. He should have tried to rub my nose in his success. If I dated a girl more than once, Jacob would jump in and start dating her. And it didn't take long for her to leave me. But even then, for the most part, I didn't care. I wasn't close to any of the girls, so if they wanted to date Jacob, it wasn't a problem for me. However, there was one girl that I really liked. Her name was Sandy Springer, and she was smart, funny, and beautiful. So when I started dating her, I took her to out-of-the-way places so Jacob wouldn't know I was interested. After several months of dating, we decided to date together. I thought that If Sandy wore my ring, then I was safe. Remember, I mentioned I was stupid. I was stupid then too. Prom was approaching, and I decided that Sandy and I would go together. I should have asked her straight away, but I'm not sure it would have done any good. Anyway, after I bought the tickets, I mentioned it to Sandy at lunch. She blushed and said that she accepted Jacob's invitation to go with him. Then I demanded and received my ring back. Then he left Sandy crying in the cafeteria. I didn't talk to her anymore. I was so angry at Sandy that I wanted to rip someone's head off. Instead, I saw Pam Taylor, captain of the cheerleading team, and Jacob's supposed girlfriend. Under normal circumstances, I would never have dared to approach her. "Hi, Pam," I said cheerfully. "How are you?" "I'm fine. What about you, Michael?" she answered. Pam was great and she wasn't stuck up. "I'm fine," I said, deciding that I had nothing to lose. "Tell me, would you like to go to prom with me?" "That's very kind of you," she replied kindly. "But I'll go with Jacob." "Oh," I pretended to be ignorant. "I must have misunderstood because I just heard Jacob ask Sandy Springer." "I guess I misunderstood." "Yeah, forget what I said. I'm sure I misheard." I left Pam flustered and talking to herself. I later found out that he and Jacob had a big fight. He may have stolen Sandy from me, but I ruined his romance with Pam. It wasn't completely satisfying, but it was better than nothing. But later that day, things got much better. "Michael," Pam called out to me as I left the school. "Hi, Pam." I continued to feign innocence. "I'm sorry I upset you then." "Don't talk nonsense, Michael." Pam's eyes narrowed. "I found out that you were dating Sandy, and that bastard Jacob stole your girlfriend." My ears were burning red. "I found out. Yes, I'm sorry. I was just trying to get back at Jacob. I'm sorry you got caught in the crossfire. Are you seriously planning on taking me to the ball?" "Well, little bear," I began to say, "don't worry about it. Yes, I will be very happy if I can take you to graduation." "Good, because I want payback," Pam said. "And if you play your cards right, it could be a very memorable evening." The prom was a real event for me. Not only did I get the opportunity to ask the most beautiful girl in school to the prom, but she made me feel like a prince. Pam was all ears. I enjoyed the expressions on the other guys' faces. They couldn't believe she was there with me. And Jacob, I don't know what he thought was going to happen, but it definitely wasn't his girlfriend dating me. I think Jacob thought Pam might go to prom as one of the football players' dates, but definitely not with me. His eyes almost popped out of his head when he saw us enter the hall. Throughout the evening, he tried to get between Pam and me. He tried to get her to leave me and sit at his table. Pam blew him off. He asked her to dance many times, but Pam didn't give him the chance. I felt really bad for Sandy because she realized that Jacob was using her. Eventually, Sandy burst into tears and asked her parents to take her. I still feel a little bad, but she made her choice and had to live with it. After the ball, Jacob was still trying to get Pam away from me. I was smart enough to know that I was playing the role of Cinderella, and by tomorrow, Pam would most likely be back with Jacob. But today, I was going to play my part to the end, and that led me to a local motel, where I had sex with the most beautiful girl in school. When I dropped Pam off, she gave me a big kiss and told me what a great guy I was. I went home floating on a cloud. But as I expected, by the following Monday, Pam and Jacob were a couple again. Still, I smirked at Jacob every time we passed in the hallway. Graduation arrived and most of us headed off to our colleges. I was sad to leave my hometown and scared of the unknown, but I didn't regret leaving Jacob forever, or at least that's what I thought. I was accepted into Georgia Tech while Jacob was going to Harvard. Of course he was going to Harvard. His grandfather had a building there named after him. I did well at Georgia Tech, majoring in software engineering, and it was at a party during my freshman year that I met Carol. I won't bore you with the details of how we courted, fell in love, and got married. To tell the truth, I think that in the beginning we were more like good friends than truly in love. Needless to say, our history was not that memorable. And even now, none of this matters. What I will say about Carol is that she was smart. She studied business at the University of Georgia. I liked her because she was not only smart, but also funny and very friendly. However, Carol was not super beautiful. She was pretty, like the girl next door. Truth be told, Carol couldn't compare to Pam, but she was about as beautiful as Sandy. For some reason, we clicked. We got married 3 months after graduating from university, and during the 5 years of marriage, I considered us quite happy. Although at the time of our marriage, we were more friends than lovers, by the 3rd year of our union, I was completely in love with Carol, and I think she was just as in love with me. We even talked about starting a family. Little did I know that my wife kind of rushed into it and started it without me. Right after graduating from school, I got a job at Zaba Security Software, a small startup company. I graduated at the top of my class, so I had my choice of jobs. The 2 brothers from Zaba sold me on the promise that I would be on the executive floor and make a fortune. However, don't get me wrong, the company was doing very well. The firm prospered and we did quality work for some very large companies. I was also paid a tidy 6-figure salary. Our job was to find security holes in the company's software and plug them. Our reputation grew, but then the brothers decided to pay us off. To my surprise, we were acquired by a company roughly the same size as Zaba, and that's when my problems began. About 3 years after I started working at Zaba, Carol wanted a new job. It so happened that Zaba was looking for an office manager. Carol applied and was hired. I was a little worried that we would both be working for the same company, but at first everything went well. We went by car and had lunch together. We worked in completely different departments and areas, so we rarely saw each other during the day. We drove to work together, kissed and went to our departments. If we were both free, which was most often, we would have lunch together and go home at the end of the day. Everything was fine until everything went wrong. I was a senior programmer, which meant that I worked on projects myself and monitored the schedules of the other 8 programmers who reported to me. But my main responsibility was to fix any problems that my team couldn't handle on their own. Fortunately, there were few such problems, which meant that our customers were very happy. Our workspace was the size of half a basketball court. We called it bullpen and worked mostly at standing desks. The room was filled with all kinds of computers, servers, interfaces, and printers. We had almost all the computer equipment you could want. We took pride in making our customers' systems as secure as possible. In the 5 years I've been with the company, we've only had one complaint where a customer's system was hacked, but we traced the hack to one of the company's employees. It disabled most of the software we had installed. This employee was not very smart, but he gave us a sleepless night. In addition to the 9 of us, we had an administrative assistant, Kimberly. She was like our girl Friday. She prepared any correspondence or memos we needed. She kept track of our supplies and made sure we never ran out of anything. Kimberly also prepared our monthly reports and kept track of our hours. Oddly enough, most of our work was initially done with pencil and paper. This allowed the programmer to get a general idea before he started typing anything into the computer. Somehow, Kimberly managed to decipher everyone's handwriting and type out notes for our files. Even though it wasn't her job, Kimberly made the best coffee for us every morning. Kimberly was about 23 or 4 years old, I guess. She had short blonde hair, deep hazel eyes, a very pretty face, but she was about 50 pounds overweight. Considering that Kimberly was only 5 feet 5 inches tall, this was a lot of weight for her. Even though she had a beautiful face, her big belly and backside immediately ruined the image. I knew Kimberly was sensitive about her weight because she always talked about how fat she was. I felt bad every time she did this, but I knew it was just her defense mechanism. All I cared about was that Kimberly was damn good at her job and a valuable asset to my team. It was a surprise that Zaba was acquired. The 2 Zaba brothers did not even have the courage to personally inform the employees about this. They asked their lawyer to make the announcement. I was furious because all the stock options that the brothers had promised when they went public were gone with that announcement. Besides, I didn't know what to do with these changes. Carol was as upset and confused by the news as I was, but she was the one who convinced me to stick with it until we saw what the new owners would do. They sent a senior vice president to oversee the transition process. At first, he concentrated on the main office. Zaba has grown from 5 employees when I joined to more than 150. From what I hear, the person at the new corporate headquarters will start in accounting. Then, he was going to make his way through the entire company. It wasn't until the second day that I learned that the vice president reviewing Zaba security software was none other than Jacob Sanders. However, at the same time, I learned that Jacob was leading the transition. I learned that our pay scale would be aligned with that of the parent company. My salary will be increased by $35,000, and Carol's salary will be increased by $15,000. My internal alarm signal told me to run rather than go to the nearest exit. However, Carol convinced me that we would be foolish to leave our current jobs, especially after the salary increase. Besides, she noted, Jacob would only work there for 6 months before leaving. The first change occurred when 4 new programmers were hired and assigned to the bullpen. Sure, they were all Harvard people, but none of them were a tenth better than anyone on my existing team. They were not only lousy programmers, but also arrogant and with a sense of their own superiority. All 4 of them immediately began to harass Kimberly. Sometimes it was sexual harassment, and sometimes it was just meanness. I tried to reassure them and point out that their behavior was unacceptable. However, they didn't stop. Instead, they just harassed Kimberly when they thought I wasn't around. Finally, I called all 4 of them into the conference room and read them the riot act. They listened to me, but I saw that they were not going to stop. Besides harassing Kimberly, all 4 of them were a pain in the ass. Nobody on my team liked them, and they did more harm than good when it came to their work. Eventually, I decided I wanted them to leave. Unfortunately, I didn't have the authority to fire them because Jacob hired them. I knew that if I demanded that he fire them, Jacob would simply ignore me. I knew that Kimberly came early every day to make coffee and prepare the office. Ever since I told off those 4 idiots for their treatment of Kimberly, I noticed that they all started coming earlier. Eventually, I realized that they were using the time before I arrived to torture the poor girl. It turned out that Kimberly was getting to the point where she was going to quit. I also knew that she loved working at Zaba and needed the job. So I decided to come early and catch them doing this. Hidden in the supply cupboard next to our small kitchen, I readied my cell phone. As I expected, Kimberly arrived and started making coffee. A few minutes later, the 4 of them arrived, and the torment began. "Hey, Ball," grinned Ted, the leader, turning to Kimberly. "Show us your tits." Fred, another of the 4, added, "I want to see your big fat ass." "Yes," said the other 2. "We will even help you take off your clothes." I saw tears rolling down Kimberly's face, and I couldn't take it anymore. I had more than enough evidence, so I came out of the closet. "You 4, pack your things and leave. You're finished." "You don't have the authority to fire us," Fred shot back. "Mr. Sanders hired us, and he said only he could fire us." "It's true," I said with an unpleasant smile on my face. "However, I have evidence that you sexually assaulted Kimberly. So let me explain what your options are. You 4 can either resign immediately, or I will turn over this video to the police. So, the choice is yours. Either you resign, or I call the police. I'll give you 15 minutes to make a decision. You can even run to Jacob if you want, but I'm sure he's not going to put his ass on the line to protect you bastards." 15 minutes later, I had all 4 resignations, and all 4 left. A look of complete relief and gratitude appeared on Kimberly's face. "Kimberly," I called her to my table after all 4 of them had left. "I'm sorry for what those 4 put you through. I should have acted sooner. If something like this happens again, promise me that you will come to me immediately. You are a wonderful person, and those 4 are just assholes." Kimberly let out a small sob and thanked me for protecting her. I told her it was part of my job, but I wasn't doing a very good job because she had to suffer for too long at the hands of those assholes. "Mr. Arnold, you don't know how much this means to me," she said, holding back tears. "I was going to quit, but I didn't know what I would do without this job. I didn't know if I could find another job that was as good." Again, Kimberly, I'm so sorry you had to put up with this garbage. I see that you are upset. If you want to take a day off, I will make sure it does not count toward your personal days or sick leave. Thank you, Mr. Arnold, but I would rather be here at work. After that day, it seemed like Kimberly couldn't do enough for me. I tried to tell her that I was just doing my job, and he continued to insist that I wasn't doing a very good job because of what she went through. Of course, I was called into Jacob's office as soon as he found out that I had forced his programmers to quit. I want these programmers hired again, he demanded as soon as I crossed the threshold of his office. This won't happen, I said decisively. I have evidence that these 4 assholes sexually assaulted and abused an administrative assistant in our department. If you want to hire them back, go ahead. But I can guarantee that a lawsuit will be filed against all 4 of them, the parent company and you. I don't think your bosses will think too highly of this. Jacob looked at me, but then smiled and relented. He tried to pretend he didn't know all the details, but that evening I realized that he was lying. Carol came home and chided me for being an asshole to Jacob. She thought I was a jerk for threatening our boss. At that moment, I should have known what Jacob was up to because my gut screamed, danger. But when everything returned to normal at home, I brushed off the incident. At the end of the day, I still believed that Carol loved me and only me. If I had listened to my intuition, I might not be in prison now, but I was stupid and allowed Jacob and my wife to lull me into a false sense of well-being. And for 2 months after the merger, nothing changed between Carol and me. I found out that the company that acquired us was called Unity Software. They were about the same size as us, but they worked mostly on government contracts. Zaba gave them the opportunity to enter the commercial market. And no, Jacob's father did not own the company. His family's fortune was made in the production of pipes and wires. However, Jacob's father sold the business while Jacob was still in college. I could say a lot of nasty things about Jacob, but I can't say he's incompetent. In fact, he did a great job bringing the 2 companies together. In fact, he convinced the board of directors to keep the Zaba name because it had a better reputation.